Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everybody, welcome to my guide for Ymir. If you can't tell, I actually have a cold right now, which is funny because Ymir's cold because he's made of ice and Ymir is the de facto guardian in SMITE. He's slow and tanky with no movement abilities but has a big hard CC ability and a big structure to stop enemies dead in their tracks. But as it stands, Ymir isn't really the best god to learn support on, simply because he dies, like, really easily. More on that later, but for now, builds. It's your typical support fare on Ymir, but you definitely want to try and exacerbate one or more of Ymir's strengths and or weaknesses. That is, get his high impact abilities up more often with some CDR, enhance his ridiculous damage with 1, maybe even 2 damage items, and finally, get Winged Blade. Any movement speed is welcome on Ymir, but in 9 out of 10 games, you really need Winged Blade on him. Winged Blade is an item which cleanses all slows and grants movement speed if you are hit by a slow, and trust me, all it takes for Ymir to die for a large majority of the game is a slow hitting him, and then everyone else hitting him, so Winged Blade is perfect to plug that gap. I personally go Winged Blade 3rd or even 2nd if the situation calls for it, but you can go it later on if you prefer. It's cheap enough to where you can kind of put it wherever you want in your build path. Relics wise, you really want to start out with a defensive relic to get yourself off the ground. As I just mentioned, Ymir dies, like, really easily. Well, I should say, he doesn't die quickly, it's just very easy to chase him down, especially in the early game. Therefore, you really want a defensive relic like Meditation, which is the best defensive relic right now, although Shell is still quite nice too if you prefer it. It's not bad just because Meditation is better. Second relic can be a wide variety of things based on the situation. Blink is the absolute classic on Ymir, but it isn't too necessary. Bracer works well on him thanks to the bonus movement speed it grants him, and of course it's just a good support relic all around. Then finally you can of course go aggressive relics like Sunder and Frenzy as well to explode people with their insane damage. Shard wise, just Horn Shard will do, but Claw Shard isn't bad if you're looking to kill people at level 2 or 3. And some secret hidden tech for you guys, Wing Shard, easy first blood every time. Keep the shard in the back of your mind while we talk about his passive. Before that though, recipes. Sturdy Stew is the go-to through and through for those of you choosing to do his support stew. With that said though, he really is great with Bountiful Bow, particularly thanks to his 1st and 3rd abilities. This is the one I'd go personally, but I get it if you just want some more raw tankiness with Sturdy Stew. Let's get to that passive. When Ymir damages or CCs an enemy with an ability, they are afflicted with Ymir's passive for 6 seconds. Enemies afflicted by the passive take double basic attack damage from Ymir for the duration, and deal 10% reduced damage to Ymir. So, right there, 2 of the best stats you could ask for. Damage mitigations, which still have no direct counter in the game, and double damage on his basic attacks, making sure any splash of damage you put onto Ymir goes a long way. The caveat of this being, of course, that you actually have to hit someone if you want to affect them with this passive. And Ymir is quite slow and stubby. So gods with excessive range on you, or even gods who are just poking you with long range abilities can do so freely without a care in the world, unaffected by this passive. That is, so long as they're not in range for your first ability. Ymir spawns a wall structure that will block all enemies, this wall lasting up to a whopping 4.5 seconds, scaling with levels and can cut off any entrance or exit to the jungle if you angle it properly. This wall cannot be killed by enemy basic attacks and can be despawned at any time by reactivating the ability. Ymir has been power crept in a lot of ways, but this ability alone is what makes Ymir relevant. Other walls tend to be smaller, can be killed by basic attacks, or come out at odd angles, but not Ymir. Just wall right behind your target at a slight angle to catch the closest exit point and boom, there's nothing they can do about it. Unless of course they have a leap or a teleport, of course, which, yeah, they're just going to go right over the wall, which is fine, since not every squishy target, or tank for that matter, that you wall in will have a leap or teleport. And even when they do, that means all you need to do is have a well-placed wall, and they instantly have to burn their movement ability since they have Ymir running at them like a Mack truck. Then, once they use their movement ability, just despawn the wall and keep moving forward. That's of course just one of the billion ways to use the wall. Naturally, cornering people in and stopping them from running away from you while chasing them are their most common uses, but again, like with Cabrakan Wall, remember, it can block things too. Blocking things like Discordia ultimates and Mercury ultimates may seem at first like something that only happens in highlight clips, but it's something that's going to be required of you as an Ymir player if you want to get the most out of the character, so learn the range of the wall to a T and brush up on what sorts of abilities you can block with the wall, as well as of course figuring out which characters are impacted by getting walled in the most. My Cabrakan tier list still applies here if you want to use that. One thing Cabrakan can't do with his wall that Ymir can is self-peel. He can use this ability at his feet while walking forward to place the wall directly behind himself, something that is absolutely perfect while being chased. Now this is pretty obvious about when you want to use this. Use it while you're getting chased, especially in the jungle. It can be extremely hard for the enemy team to get around it and actually still be able to kill you. And you need to be walking straight forward, not walking diagonally. And finally, like I mentioned, you cannot be affected by any slow in the game. Again, another reason Winged Blade is so great for Ymir. It seems like I'm over-explaining it a little bit, but it's very important for Ymir's survival that you use this little trick, so it's imperative you know when you can actually use it, because if you try this outside of the parameters I just mentioned, you're going to wall yourself in and kill yourself. Let's get to the part of why you need to maximize your skill with Ymir's wall by talking about Ymir's second ability. Ymir roots himself in place and creates a small rectangle AoE in front of himself that deals damage and slows, and of course, applies Ymir's passive. This is very simple. Look at your target, press the ability button, and then stuff happens. It's exactly what you want it to do. However, it's where Ymir's speed becomes a factor. Rooting yourself in place to then wind up for an ability with only moderate range isn't the best look. So, once you get out of the early game and people are running around with full passive movement speed or even some bonus movement speed through items, if you go for this ability raw, it can be genuinely hard to hit. But don't forget about combining it with your first ability to make them run in only one of two distinct directions, thanks to the wall. Then, when they make it clear which direction they're going to go to get around the wall, to them, and yes, this ability will go over the wall. Or under it, I guess. But that's nothing compared to how Ymir's third ability combos with it. Ymir roots himself in place, then damages and stuns all enemies in a wide cone AoE in front of himself. So yeah, again, Ymir roots himself, the guy with low movement speed and no movement ability. But yet again, your wall comes in clutch to help you close that gap a bit. Speaking of gaps, keep in mind that this is a cone, so if and when it's obvious for the enemy that you're going to go for a freeze, they may actually walk to the side and towards you to avoid it, so this ability plays against your natural inclination to try and move closer to people to have a better chance of hitting them. Really with this ability you want to try and cast it at around the middle of its vertical range for the best shot of hitting it, because like his second ability, rooting himself in place means Ymir can very easily miss a target who's fast on their feet, even though the area is rather large. But of course, this is where the 2 becomes simply the easiest ability in the game to hit. Freeze one or more enemies, then line up your 2 for a long stun into a long slow and a bunch of basic attacks. Speaking of which, once this ability is rank 4 or 5, you can freeze, basic attack, then 2 for even more damage in this combo. We have either wall 3-2 chase, or more preferably, blink 3-2 and then you can save your wall for the best possible opportunity to use it while chasing. Then when the chips are down for your opponent, by that I mean their movement ability is down, there's only one more ability that can seal their fate, and luckily it's Ymir's ultimate. Ymir roots himself in place. Again, I guess. But this time becomes CC immune and slows all enemies in the AoE around himself. And even though it doesn't damage enemies yet, this will still afflict them with Ymir's passive, so anyone inside of it will have a hard time trying to kill you before what happens next. Ymir charges for up to 3 seconds, then deals heavy damage to all enemies inside the AoE, but most important, Ymir is able to cancel this ability at any time for reduced damage. That's a good thing, because a fully charged Ymir ult has a whopping 1100 base damage with 150% power scaling, making it one of the hardest hitting single damage abilities in the game. But obviously, you rarely ever get to apply that damage. Typically this ability is the last line of defense and offense during your combos. Where a lot of Guardians do their main combo over the course of a fight, then kinda walk around trying to body block and use relics, Ymir uses this ability as his final seal of fate. Don't think about it like a nuclear bomb like a Poseidon ultimate just because it does a lot of damage. Focus it more on being a big slow. And what are big slows good for? Well, everything really. Peeling for your teammates, self-peeling for yourself, and so on. The possibilities are endless, but that doesn't make it complicated. It fits squarely into the end of any of your main combos. Blink 3-2-1 ult, 1-3-2 ult, and so on. Blink ulting isn't horrible just for a slow, but that should be seen as a last resort. And if you can, as I just showed, always try to wall enemies in so they have trouble getting out of the area, so you can try to get more damage by charging up for longer. Of course, this isn't like a Kabrakan or a Charon ultimate where every squishy on enemy team's like, oh god. Most of them can just walk right out of this, or even worse, use any movement ability just to get out of it before you can even hit them. Again, that's where the wall comes in to try and make that more difficult. So, while there certainly are moments where you can machine gun out your combos, sometimes you may just want to take it slow in 3, 2, then basic attacks while trying to fish out a movement ability. Then once you use a movement ability to get away from you, wall and then ultimate to try and keep them CC'd for yourself or your team. Don't forget about just using it for raw damage either. Clearly the ability has uses, but it's not the most impactful ultimate in the game, so you can actually use the full charge on things like Gold Fury, Fire Giant, and Pyromancers to make sure they don't get stolen. And hey, if you secure one of those objectives with the ultimate, that's as good of a use as it would have had in a fight anyways. But let's get to some combos with the Ymir. 1-3-2 ult. Blink 3-2-1 ult. One, 2 basic attacks, 3 ult. Blink 3-2 basic attacks, 1 ult. For ability leveling, you want your 2 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 1 at level 3. If you have a very fast clearing hunter, you can actually get your 1 at level 2 and block the enemy minions from hitting yours with the wall. It's a very cringe but very effective strategy. From there you max your 3, your 1, then your 2, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. That's a competitive-minded leveling order, but generally, your teammates aren't great and you want to max the 2 over the 1. And the most sweaty Ymir players will actually max 1, 3, then 2, skipping leveling the ultimate entirely after level 5 until the 1 and the 3 are maxed. That says a lot about Ymir. His second, third, and fourth abilities are so clearly behind what other Guardians are bringing to the table, but his wall is so good that he's viable all the way up to the competitive level. Obviously though, you and I are at the competitive level, but even at this lower level, Ymir's flaws are plain to see as soon as you play a few other Guardians. Before making this guide, it had actually been a while since I played Ymir, and it was genuinely throwing me off because the guy would not stop rooting himself in place. Yet Pyres just kinda stopped making support tanks who lacked movement abilities after a while, and the trade-off was, hey, the gods who have no movement abilities have better CC. But now 10 years later, there's plenty of supports who have the same level of CC as Ymir, yet have good or even great movement abilities like Charon or Yamoja. But nobody, and I mean nobody, has access to anything quite as impactful as Ymir's wall in their core kit. And as a bonus, it enhances all the weaknesses that Ymir has in the rest of his kit, making it harder for people to walk out of his ult, making them eat your basic attacks after 2ing them, getting them in range for your 3, and so on. But yeah, without his wall, Ymir is a lot like Skadi, who, funny enough, is another ice-themed Nordic god. The god's really good when you think about them in just a one-on-one, chasing someone down and CCing them for your team. But then you remember the other 4 enemy team members exist, and between Ymir's slow abilities and rooting himself in place anytime he wants to CC somebody, yeah, it can be pretty rough if you don't get a good wall off in a fight. That's not to say he's useless. You can absolutely still win fights with an Ymir who had a bad wall, but it's just a lot more difficult than it otherwise would be. And to tie it back with the beginning of the video, if you're against decent players, expect to die. A lot. But luckily, Ymir has decent CC and once more, that incredible wall to keep himself in the game no matter how far behind he gets. And I have to acknowledge at least once as well, he's dirt easy to play to boot. That's all I have on Ymir for now. Thanks for watching.